Let's bring on our good friend Stephen Yates, this is his wheelhouse. He had previously advised former VP Dick Cheney in the Bush White House, of course, and he ran Radio Free Asia until the communists were like, we can't have this man. He's dangerous. And he knows all about this. Stephen, always good to see you. So I have to ask you this, like some of the sass talk that they've had. I saw that Chinese state media vows that its military is going to show up at the United States doorstep, that they will see the PLA show up in the not too distant future. That's like an op-ed from the communist controlled media. So it's coming from the Communist Party. And they've said this, and then they've been like really running their mouths on this just over the weekend. I've got to get your thoughts on that first and foremost, though, because where is this? This to me seems this is a new level. So where's this coming from?
No, it's totally a new level, but I was informed by a very august Washington think tank writing in the New York Times, of course, that we don't need to worry. There hasn't been a demonstration of weakness in the Middle East. And actually, the Chinese are scared because now we're going to pick up our toys from the Middle East and go to Asia. And China's totally deterred, and they're not going to move against Taiwan. And the proof of that is that the Chinese state media puts right out there for the whole world to read in the English language. Guess what? We should run a warplane over Taiwan because the Americans and everyone else just be on notice that at a time of our choosing, we're going on this. So, I'm told that I shouldn't worry because some wide-bottomed think tanker has said in the paid for press, there's no problem. But the Chinese seem to be wolf warrior about this. So no, the president didn't have a quote unquote perfect phone call over the weekend with Xi Jinping. People, maybe Jen Psaki could help everyone know that half of this time is taken in interpretation. So it goes from one language into English, but then there's the interpretation from English into the phrases the president can speak. And so there's even less content going back and forth in these phone calls. I'm sure it's super friendly though.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, super friendly. It was a perfect call. I'm sure that Biden had is talking with Stephen Yates. Is there? I really would love to see the transcript of this because I can't imagine Biden even having the wherewithal or knowledge to bring up to China to discuss anything about the stories at the end of last week about China wanting to take over Bagram Air Force Base and starting that. I mean, that's basically like one of the first building blocks for them to get that land bridge there. And I'm sure I'm sure they didn't talk about that. I'm also probably sure they didn't talk about Taiwan or much anything else. How much you want to bet it was about climate change and green energy?
No, it was super perfect. And Jen Psaki used to be an advocate for full disclosure on phone call transcripts. I remember
that's a great point. Yes.
There is a certain failed colonel that was out there that knew about how to make national security strategy better than the elected commander in chief. And so I don't know where the colonel is now advocating for transparency in these phone calls. But the Chinese, through their press, give more detail about what the contents of the call were. Now, in my experience, the Chinese can be creative writers like Ben Rhodes about what are the actual contents of these calls. And so we have this propaganda war that we have Team Biden basically fighting with their hands tied behind their back of their own choosing. So they'll give like a 4-line plain vanilla content-free readout. Oh, it was 90 minutes. Who cares? It was very respectful. Why was it respectful? What about this needs to be respectful? Should be businesslike. I thought now that we deal businesslike with the Taliban, it should be businesslike with China too.
Right.
But they give this non-helpful answer. The Chinese said, "Oh no, we told the Americans that they better fix U.S.-China relations. They better not be hostile, and they better start being more constructive in the world." So the Chinese are actually more open about what this perfect, constructive, respectful phone call was all about.
Oh, yes. And then, of course, talking with Stephen Yates, they say the U.S. will definitely see the PLA show up on its doorstep in the not too distant future. That's a threat.
Some of these things used to be called by the experts around the Beltway as acts of war. Now that's totally solved because we've had a perfect exit from Afghanistan and we have perfect phone calls. There will now be no war. But the Chinese seem to be basically saying, no, this is, we're not going to have a war. You're just going to forfeit. And And so I say this flippantly only out of sadness, not out of a
Right.
desire for satire. I really fear that this is, as I say every time, this is provocative weakness, and they're just eating it up and
Yeah.
pushing and pushing and pushing. And anyone who knows anything about the Chinese Communist Party knows that they push until they face sufficient pushback as they calculate, okay, it's not worth it for us right now.
Right.
And Team Biden has just given them a go signal.
And it feels as though, honestly, the more I look at this, it kind of feels like the time to actually push back on this before they get too powerful is kind of running out. Because so long as they're dependent, so long as they're an export dependent economy, then, they're going to be, that's the only thing left from what I see that's keeping them in line, so to speak.
Right. Well, I mean, I know that there are some people out there in the parallel universe known as social media that will say, oh, you worked in the White House and so you're a warmonger. I don't want a war with China.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to forfeit America and our freedoms or our allies. And so just take a small thing that isn't like sending aircraft carriers in or launching missiles towards China, though I might not shed a tear at someday if that comes necessary. But short of the war options, the president, while bloviating at the 9/11 memorial site, was basically saying things like, well, Trump supporters, they need to understand that autocrats like the leader of China are telling me that democracy can't work and can't win. That's actually said a heck of a lot more about that perfect phone call than Jen Psaki's readout. That the president actually thinks these guys feel like they're on the ascent and that we're divided. Now, why would we be divided? Could it be that social media allows these purveyors of disinformation free rein while it shuts down critics? Right. Could it be that the president isn't actually pushing back on this? Why aren't we creating doubt about their political system? Why aren't we pushing the truth? Why are we forcing companies to re-engineer what we do to Americans, but we're not forcing those companies to re-engineer how they approach China? And so we have all of this twisted up all wrong. And I think that if we can get some of the political warfare stuff right, we're supposed to be the super great creators, the entrepreneurs, the entertainers of the world. Why aren't we doing a better job of this? I think we know some of the answers because a lot of these tools have turned their fire on Americans instead of outward. But really, if we're going to avoid war, that has to change.
You make a really good point talking to Stephen Yates, and you can find him on Twitter at YatesComms. I think back to World War II, and one of my favorite bits of history is looking back at kind of the propaganda effort that the Allies were using against the Axis, whether it was the Ghost Army. I was reading the story about how Bill Blass, before he got into fashion, was actually one of those people who was part of the Ghost Army and how they were really faking out and trying to break the morale. All of these different factions that were really heavily involved in, PSYOPs is essentially what it was. And it was every aspect of American culture, from Hollywood, entertainment, to the people who were in the factories, everywhere. Everyone was united in the defeat of a common goal, or in a common goal, defeat of a common enemy. But I feel that the difference between now and then, and I wanted your thoughts on this, is nobody liked the axis of evil back then. But today I feel like we have too many people who have embraced Marxism without even acknowledging it. So as a result, we don't have a common enemy, because too often the messaging from the White House is that the enemy is you, the enemy is your neighbor, it's the person who's unvaxxed, it's the person who voted for Trump, it's the person who didn't love Hillary Clinton, it's all of these other entities except the Communist Chinese Party, and that's a problem.
It is. It's a huge problem. We've wasted a generation of investment teaching people to hate and doubt America. Instead of correctly identifying the threats to the world. And you don't have to be as loving of America as I want everyone to be, but you shouldn't be on the hate America bandwagon.
Right.
And we shouldn't be paying for it and giving people a safe harbor to basically teach that trash. But how are we supposed to recruit people to make the sacrifices that a generation did in the wake of 9/11? We can debate all we want about the rightness or wrongness about how they were used, but there was a whole generation of people that were ready to say, in the wake of the worst attack in ages, I'm here to serve. Show me where to go. They were actually hungry to take up the risk, and they were prepared to pay the price. And we don't have that generation to draw upon. Thankfully, we still have some coming from some parts of the country that still get a real education, still salute the flag. We apparently still have people who will go out to football games and stand for the real national anthem and all of that good stuff. But these divisions and the degradation of our country actually makes us weaker should we need to call upon young people again. And it's the young people that have to step in and do this. It's not the middle-aged couch potatoes writing for the mass media for consumption. It's the young people that have to be convinced it's worthy. And so I think you're right about the days gone by, but this isn't just a call to go back to Mayberry. It's recognizing that the threats that come from outside are greater than the challenges we face within. That has almost always been true. You could sort of set aside the Civil War and some of our other imperfections we worked on, but by and large, compared to everyone else, we got this more right than everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Last quick question for you, Stephen Yates. You were there during the Bush administration. You were there when, that's the 9/11 administration. That's what had happened on there. It happened when George W. Bush was in office. And the way that the nation came together, I always wonder, is that going to happen again? I have to share with you, obviously, I'm sure you saw that Brian Stelter tweet where he said, yes. "Oh, thank goodness for yes. those media personalities, those anchors, him and Dan Rather. It was like the biggest backpat thing I've ever seen. They were the national leaders, Stephen, because all the other leaders were in bunkers and were hiding. But I clearly remember George W. Bush giving an address to the nation that night from the White House.
Yeah, it's a real shame that CNN has no footage of Mayor Rudy Giuliani walking down the street into the disaster zone that very day, having multiple press conferences. I remember the president giving remarks at several locations. They covered him in the morning when he received the word with Annie Card whispering in his ear. He stopped off at a couple of undisclosed locations on the way back to Washington. He gave a full address to the nation. But yeah, let's go ahead and give a gold medal of courage to someone who wasn't even broadcasting at the time. Yeah. The real leaders in everything. I was very, very moved by how the country responded to 9/11. I have a lot of painful memories and thoughts about the things I think that were done wrong in the wake of it. But the overwhelming patriotism. I had kids that grew up in that era where they were happy to display a flag, would stand for the pledge, right. would stand for the national anthem, and it was important. I have a family that's mostly Democrat, and in the aftermath for that, for a time. You could talk about loving the country and serving the country and all of that. So I wish we could get back to it, but a president dividing the country isn't going to help, and social media exacerbating those divisions by demonizing people who just want to honor our founding documents and the things that hold us together.
I won't do it either. Stephen Yates, always a pleasure, my friend, at YatesComs on Twitter. Thank you, sir. Good to see you.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.